Most people watching Invincible Season 4 think they're seeing Thragg for the first time, but his story starts thousands of years before Mark Grayson was born. I went through the full comics run to piece together the complete picture. Thragg was born during the era of Emperor Argal, the legitimate ruler of Viltrum. His father was one of Argal's closest advisors, but the family connection meant less than what happened next, because from the moment Thragg could stand, the Empire had a plan for him, like he was conceived through eugenics. As the Viltrumites practiced selective breeding, engineering their offspring to maximize physical potential, Thragg was the most deliberate output that system ever produced. The training regime from birth had one specific goal: make him the strongest Viltrumite alive. Undeniably, inarguably above every other member of his species, visible and unquestionable because the role he was being prepared for required exactly that. The regime worked completely. By the time he reached maturity, Thragg had been trained in every form of combat the Empire had accumulated across thousands of years of planetary conquest. He understood strategy, warfare, and how to run an empire that had subjugated civilizations across the known universe. The physical dominance was one part of what he was built for. Now, the governance was the other. He joined the civil war that followed Argal's death and fought on the side of the stronger Viltrumites, which was really the only possible outcome given what he'd been made to do. The Civil War didn't happen because Viltrumites disagreed about ideology, it happened because Argal's assassination left a vacuum and the species resolved vacuums through combat. The weak died, the strong survived, and the survivors were the most extreme physical specimens of an already extreme species. Thragg emerged from that war leading the survivors. He was granted the title of Grand Regent, not Emperor. Regent because there was supposed to be an heir to find and restore. Right, he kept Emperor Argal's skull in the throne room as a permanent reminder of what the Empire had lost and what he was holding in trust until blood could be found. That skull sat there for thousands of years. Here's the thing, most people watching the show don't fully understand yet. The physical power is the surface. Underneath it is a lie that ran for thousands of years. After Argal was killed by Thetis, a Viltrumite who turned traitor and eventually founded the Coalition of Planets, the Empire had a crisis of legitimacy. Thragg was the strongest. He was the leader in practice, but he wasn't the heir. The blood of Argal still existed somewhere in the universe. His actual mandate was to find it and hand power over when the time came. He didn't. The Scourge virus created the opening when the virus nearly wiped out the species, reducing them to fewer than 50 surviving members. The chaos made it easy to stop looking. The heir probably died in the outbreak. Nolan Grayson, living on Earth as Omni-Man, was the bloodline of Argal. His son, Mark, was the heir after him. The truth reached Thragg through the events surrounding Mark's exposure to a sample of the Scourge virus, when the biological connection was discovered. Once Thragg knew, the calculation shifted completely. From that moment forward, every decision he makes has two layers. Managing the situation meant keeping the bloodline from asserting its claim before he could quietly remove the problem. He couldn't acknowledge what he knew without surrendering everything. That tension runs underneath the entire second half of his story. For most of the series' early run, Thragg operates from the shadows. He's barely on screen, but pull on any thread of what happens to Mark in the first half of the story, and it leads back to Thragg's decisions. He's the authority behind the Viltrumite presence on Earth. He's the one who assessed Nolan's failure to conquer the planet and decided what happened next. He's the voice Conquest feared and reported to. Conquest's relationship with Thragg is the clearest window into the power dynamic. Conquest was among the most dangerous Viltrumites alive. He nearly killed Mark twice. He had centuries of actual warfare behind him, and the kind of physical dominance that most opponents never recovered from. And he begged on his knees in front of Thragg after failing his mission. Yeah, not apologized. Begged. That kind of fear doesn't come from a power gap that's only somewhat larger. It comes from something that operates in a completely different register. So Thragg's response was to keep him useful. Conquest failed, but he was still valuable, so Thragg sent him back out. He sent other Viltrumites. He ran the whole Earth operation as a calculated exercise while simultaneously sitting on the secret of the air underneath everything. Thragg was also extremely well informed about coalition movements throughout the build-up to the war. He knew what was coming, he just didn't have the numbers to stop it. This is where everything he built over thousands of years falls apart in a single engagement. The coalition of planets came with everything they could assemble. Mark, Oliver, Nolan, Battle Beast, Tech Jacket, Space Racer, Alan the Alien, the Scourge virus as a last resort hanging over the whole engagement. Thragg knew the shape of what was coming, he just didn't have the numbers to stop it. The planet Viltrum was destroyed. Thousands of years of history marked the architecture of an empire that had conquered civilizations across the known universe gone. Thragg's response was genuine grief and rage in the same moment. He cried. The comics show this explicitly, and it's worth sitting with because it's one of the only times in the entire run where something cracks through the control he always projects. He'd carried Argyll's skull for thousands of years as the emblem of what he was preserving. He'd made every compromise in service of the Empire's continuation. And now the physical Empire didn't exist anymore. Thetis offered surrender in that moment. Thragg decapitated him, the man who killed Argyll, who founded the resistance that organized the war that destroyed Viltrum. Thragg took his head right there in the chaos. Thousands of years of intent. He had discharged all at once. What followed was the Earth deal. Thragg brought the surviving Viltrumites to Earth and negotiated directly with Mark and Nolan. The terms were that Viltrumites would live among humans and rebuild numbers through normal procreation, staying under Coalition radar. The implicit threat was that refusing meant Earth's destruction. Mark and Nolan accepted, but the arrangement was always temporary in Thragg's mind. He was buying time. Most people assumed the war was the low point. It wasn't. This was. Thragg's quiet attempts to eliminate Mark and Nolan before anyone else discovered the bloodline were exposed. The Viltrumites on Earth held a tribunal. Nolan, as the legitimate bloodline of Argyll, had the authority to rule. Thragg had been concealing that for thousands of years and actively working to kill the rightful heirs to prevent them from taking the position. By the Empire's own rules, that was treason. The Viltrumites, who'd settled on Earth, sided against him. These weren't the conquering soldiers Thragg had always commanded, they were Viltrumites, who'd formed real relationships with humans, had children on Earth, and were building something that looked less like an empire and more like a life. They'd become different from what he needed them to be. 4 of them attacked him simultaneously at the tribunal. 4 elite Viltrumites coordinating on one target changes the math in ways that his individual dominance can't fully compensate for. He survived. He took serious damage doing it. Nolan sentenced him to exile, not death. That decision is one of the more significant mistakes in the series. Nolan's mercy, his choice to treat Thragg's defeat as the end of the threat rather than the obligation to finish it, was the kind of restraint that felt principled in the moment and cost them enormously later. Alan understood this. He sent Battle Beast to Thraxa specifically because he knew exile wasn't a solution. He was right. Nolan sent him away instead of killing him. That's the decision that defines everything that follows. Thragg went to Thraxa, the planet Nolan had previously occupied and governed. The Thraxans were a species carrying partial Viltrumite ancestry from an earlier encounter, and they aged and reproduced at a much faster rate than humans. Their children grew to maturity quickly, as Thragg understood exactly what that meant. What he built there is one of the most disturbing storylines in the series, described plainly. He impregnated thousands of Thraxan women. The comics make the industrial scale of this explicit. Women waiting in lines, births happening continuously. The palace on Thraxa converted into something like a reproductive factory. He was manufacturing an army from his own genetics, using the Thraxan reproductive rate as the mechanism and the planet as the production facility. Within a few years, he had thousands of Thraxan Viltrumite hybrid children who aged rapidly toward combat readiness. The twins Onaan and Ursal became his most capable commanders. Battle Beast arrived in that window. Alan had found out Nolan let Thragg go and sent Battle Beast to finish what the exile was supposed to prevent. What followed was one of the great fights in the comics. It ran 3 to 4 days of continuous combat across the planet. Thragg went into it already carrying a severe abdominal wound from a Ragnar ambush that happened before the fight even started. He lost his eye during it. He kept going. Eventually, he ripped Battle Beast's intestines out to end it. Before he died, Battle Beast thanked Thragg and called it the greatest fight of his life. That reaction says something. Battle Beast had fought everything the universe had to offer across his entire existence. What he found in Thragg was the only opponent who gave him the thing he'd spent his whole life searching for. Thragg tore his hide off and wore it as a cape with a gold Viltrum Empire symbol. That cape stayed with him through the final war, through the fight with Nolan, through the sun. Oliver, Mark's half-brother, was sent by Alan to infiltrate Thragg's army and undermine it from the inside. He worked at it for a while before Thragg found him. Thragg fatally impaled him. Oliver died protecting Mark's daughter Tara from the attack. The final confrontation came near the sun. Mark united the Coalition and the Viltrumites loyal to Nolan and pushed Thragg's army back across his conquered territories. Thragg didn't retreat. He moved toward the fight. He'd stopped managing and calculating. He just wanted to end it. Nolan fought him directly. The fight was brutal across multiple exchanges. 5 centuries of warfare and everything he'd survived died. Thragg broke Mark's arms. Mark's body was barely recognizable. One of Robot's remote suits found Mark mid-fight and provided a few seconds of thermal protection, while Thragg kept burning unprotected. In that window, Mark bit through Thragg's throat. Alan pulled Mark out afterward. Thragg died inside the sun. No empire, no children waiting, no heir to oppose, just the fight, taken all the way to the end in the one environment that could actually finish it. If you want the full breakdown of Thragg's powers in the Invincible universe, that video is on screen right now.